With this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio, we are celebrating our 26-and-a-half-year position, so it's more than a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1378, with a release and air date of Saturday, July 26, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone. Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1378 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL files comments to protect the 70-centimeter amateur radio band. We will have all the details. The FCC explores overhauling the National Emergency Alert System and regains its authority to hold spectrum auctions. The 2025 AMSAT Board of Directors elections are underway. The Radio Amateurs of Canada issues a new examination question pool. Amateur radio helps locate a missing mother and son in the California mountains. The FCC pirate radio crackdown hits a ranch in Washington state. QSL manager Joseph Accure, W3HNK, becomes a silent key. The amateur bands will be going to Cats and Dogs in the near future. The ARRL is on the receiving end of a brand new Flex radio installation at W1AW. We will tell you how to look up and live. Changes are afoot in several ARRL sections. We will tell you about them. The ARRL and Radio Relay signed a Memorandum of Understanding. And if you live in the UK, you have a chance to activate waterways throughout the country. We will have the story coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us there's promotion, and then there's amateur radio. Our original amateur radio historian, the late Bill Continelli, W2XOI, returns with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives. This week, Bill takes a look at the history of amateur radio repeaters. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting live and in person, and in color, from our headquarters studio here just outside Albany, New York, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where I'm told the corn is sweating as much as I am, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And reporting from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau in the village of Hilton, New York, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where it sure is hot here in the dog days of summer, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from a sweltering Troy, New York news bureau, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains, where our new mic boom is adding the audio enhancement of its spring resonance and reverberations, not to mention the subliminal creaks and moans of its unlubricated pivot rivets. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
Leading off the news this week, The ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has filed comments with the Federal Communication Commission to oppose part of an application that would impact the 70-centimeter amateur band for telemetry, tracking, and command of satellites. The application from AST and Science LLC requests unprecedented authorization to 430 through 440 MHz for a constellation totaling 248 satellites to communicate with 5 ground stations using up to 5 channels with up to 256 kHz bandwidth. The formal opposition, filed by ARRL's Washington Council, asserts that the permission AST seeks to use the 430 through 440 MHz band should be denied because AST does not demonstrate need for telemetry, tracking, and command spectrum beyond that available within existing allocations. The filing goes on to highlight just how unprecedented this request is. The requested spectrum is not allocated for the requested purpose. The 430 through 440 MHz band is not allocated domestically or internationally for the requested space-to-Earth and Earth-to-space satellite telemetry, tracking, and command operations. As others already have noted in this proceeding, signals in this band from AST's current 5-satellite constellation have been observed throughout the world, including the United States, notwithstanding that the satellites are authorized to communicate only with 5 ground stations well outside of the United States. From the operations by the current 5 satellites, it appears that the satellites at times have transmitted continuously in the 430 through 440 MHz band throughout their orbit, not just when in communication with one of the authorized ground stations. This activity defeats the purpose of preventing interference in the United States by limiting operations in the band to ground stations distant from the United States. Authorizing an additional 243 satellites to use this band, which would result in multiple satellites over the United States at all times, would effectively usurp this band's allocated use. The 70-centimeter band is also used in emergency communications. As recently as early July, ARRL volunteers serving in the Amateur Radio Emergency Service made headlines for providing critical communications in flood-ravaged areas of the Texas Hill Country, allowing the 70-centimeter band to become overrun with telemetry, tracking, and command satellite operations could impact the ability for the amateur radio service to be used in future disasters. Telemetry, tracking, and command operations in the 430 through 440 MHz band are capable of causing harmful interference to radio amateur communications, including to amateur satellites operating in the 435 through 438 MHz subband, the comments state. The comments go on to outline why the application would be non-compliant with the International Telecommunications Union Radio Regulations Treaty. Reply comments to the application are due by August 5, 2025. ARRL will continue to promote and protect the amateur radio spectrum.
The Federal Communications Commission is preparing for 2 major initiatives: the return of auctioning spectrum licenses and a top-to-bottom assessment of the nation's emergency alert system. The FCC's ability to auction spectrum had expired but was restored in a bill signed by President Donald Trump on July 4th. The frequencies eyed for auction are in the so-called AWS-3 band for advanced wireless services. These are unused microwave frequencies that have been allocated for 5G commercial wireless. The auctions would be the first of their kind in the United States in 4 years. The FCC has also prioritized a system-wide reevaluation of the nation's emergency communications technology. The emergency alert system makes use of radio and TV, while the wireless emergency alerts utilize mobile devices. The FCC is set to vote on moving ahead with this system-wide assessment at its August 7th meeting, with an eye toward pushing for upgraded technologies.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
This month, a significant milestone in American communication history was achieved as President Franklin D. Roosevelt announced the first appointments to the newly established Federal Communications Commission. This landmark event, occurring 91 years ago, marks the creation of an agency tasked with overseeing the rapidly evolving landscape of communications in the United States, a move hailed as a bold step toward regulating an industry that was vital to the nation's economic and social fabric. The FCC was created under the Communications Act of 1934, signed into law by President Roosevelt on June 19, 1934. This legislation consolidated the regulatory functions previously handled by the Federal Radio Commission, the Interstate Commerce Commission, and other bodies into a single, independent agency. The FCC's mandate is to regulate interstate and international communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable, ensuring that the public interest is served. The agency oversees licensing for broadcasters, promotes competition in telecommunications, protects consumers, and ensures access to communication services across the nation. In its early days, the FCC focused heavily on managing the burgeoning radio industry, setting standards for frequency allocation and preventing signal interference. On this historic day, President Roosevelt appointed 7 commissioners to lead the FCC, with Eugene O. Sykes named as the first chairman. Sykes, a former judge and member of the Federal Radio Commission, brought experience in radio regulation to the role. The other appointees included a mix of legal, technical, and business experts, reflecting the diverse challenges the agency would face. Their appointments were met with optimism as the nation grappled with the rapid growth of radio broadcasting and the need for standardized oversight. The creation of the FCC and its first appointments came at a pivotal moment. The 1930s saw radio become a central part of American life, with millions tuning in for news, entertainment, and cultural programs. However, the airwaves were chaotic, with overlapping signals and unregulated stations causing widespread interference. The FCC's formation was a direct response to these challenges, aiming to bring order and fairness to the communications sector.
The National Association for Amateur Radio, ARRL, and the Radio Relay International have signed a Memorandum of Understanding. The formal agreement outlines the value of the organizations that they find in cooperating together. Radio Relay International, or RRI, was established in 2016 to enhance and promote effective nationwide messaging and emergency communications. Since its founding, RRI has developed an extensive work product consisting of a wide variety of training programs, a tested and evolved national response plan, and communications facilities designed to better prepare radio amateurs to serve their community in times of emergency. Central to these goals has been the modernization of the national traffic system. The National Traffic System, created by ARRL in 1949, is a network of trained amateur radio operators who ensure the rapid transmission and relay of messages. In addition to basic voice and Morse code CW communications networks, the NTS has recently modernized through the addition of the Digital Traffic Network, as well as interoperable messaging gateways and specialized software templates developed in association with the WinLink development team, which operates an international radio email service well suited to disaster response. Through last year's hurricanes and the recent devastating floods in Texas, we're seeing amateur radio continue to be a vital tool before and during times of crisis, said ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnston, KE5MHV. Amateur radio works when all else fails, and traffic handling is an important part of that, he said. Future plans for the improvement of the national traffic system include the development of additional robust HF digital networks, improved interoperability with local and state emergency communications orgs, and continued development of local and regional VHF and UHF digital packet radio networks. Coordination between RRI and ARRL will play an important role in achieving these goals.
A new question bank will be used for all basic amateur radio certificate examinations starting last Tuesday, July 15, 2025 in Canada. Candidates, instructors, and authors of amateur radio study guides may want to study the new question bank, which is available for download from the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada website. Radio Amateurs of Canada has had a committee of 20 instructors and accredited examiners working to update and improve the quality of the 984 questions, 984 correct answers, and 2,952 distractors in the question bank. This is the first major update to the question bank since 2013. Still with amateur radio exams and in New Zealand, their new question bank will take effect on January 1st, 2026, so as not to disadvantage anyone who is studying for their exam now. Exam advisors will be notified in December to update their exams and destroy the old printed exams.
Electricity is a killer. About 150 people die each year at work from contact with electricity. According to the Electrical Safety Foundation International, half of those are from contact with power lines. That data is just workplace deaths, so recreational and public service volunteering aren't even accounted for. In a recent article, ARRL New Mexico Section Manager Bill Matter, K-A-T-E, shared safety concerns and processes that can be implemented at ARRL Field Day sites. I'd like to share a simple phrase that may enhance your situational awareness. Look up and live. Here with more details on this important topic is John Ross, KD8IDJ, and Sierra Harrop, W5DX, who share this special report.
Electricity is a necessary component of any amateur radio station, but overhead power lines can be deadly, especially for portable operations. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX, joins us now from Newington. And Sierra, you have some safety tips that could help keep hams safe, back from your TV news days.
Yeah, it's just a simple phrase, look up and live. And it's something that was drilled into us back in the day when TV news was done with pneumatic masts out of live trucks and steerable dishes on set. Yeah, absolutely. You'd often get to a scene and you were in a hurry, you were trying to get on the air, the assignment desk was blowing up your walkie-talkie or your cell phone later to get the live shot up. But you had to take the moment and you had to look up and live. We recently had a story where one of our fellow amateur radio operators, it appears, may have put a mast into a power line and unfortunately became a silent key because of it. And it's just a tragedy. And so I wanted to put together some of the safety information that I had from that TV news world with the phrase, look up and live. And what we used to do when we'd get there, we would walk outside of the live truck about 20 feet around, walk the circumference, looking up, making sure there's no obstructions, making sure there's no tree branches, making sure there's no power lines. And look up and live is the phrase. And, another piece of safety advice I'd impart, if for some reason the vehicle you're in does become energized, say a line falls on you or you get a mast into power lines somehow, don't get out of it. Unless it's on fire or emergency crews are there to help you, stay put. You're going to be more safe inside of it than you are if you try to get out, because if you become that path to ground, the electricity goes out in decreasing voltages, concentric rings around the vehicle. And if you connect two of those voltages, it's going to be lethal for you. So if you do have to get out, bunny hop or shuffle your feet, and otherwise just wait for them to come and de-energize the line. And again, the phrase, look up and live. I just want every ham to take that to heart.
Sierra, thank you. Great having you with us. And there is a great article about ham safety in this week's ARRL letter, but you can find that at arrl.org.
Sierra went on to say that look up and live was drilled into me and every other television news employee who worked with electronic news gathering vehicles that had a pneumatic mast or satellite dish. It was the title of an industry standard safety video published by the National Press Photographers Association. In pursuit of our amateur radio hobby, we should apply even more diligence. There's no pressure to get on for a ham radio activation. Take your time, walk around, and be diligent. Look up and live. Portable masts, vertical antennas, wire antennas slung up into a tree, anything you put up can become energized if it contacts an overhead wire. Do not take chances. Even what appears to be a phone or fiber line could be carrying lethal voltages. Do not become the path to ground. Please be careful when erecting portable gear within the wires environment. Remember, look up and live. We thank the ARRL and Sierra Harrop W5DX for use of this report.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The FCC has issued a notice of illegal pirate radio broadcasting to a rural ranch in Washington state, even as a high-stakes constitutional challenge out of South Florida is testing the FCC's authority to punish unlicensed radio broadcasters. The Three Brothers Ranch LLC, the owners of a property in Quinault, Washington, are currently on the hook for unauthorized transmissions coming from a property located on South Shore Road. The signal was first identified on May 7 by FCC Enforcement Bureau agents based out of Portland. Under the Pirate Act, the FCC can hold property owners responsible for unlicensed operations, even if they are not the broadcaster. The Commission is continuing its enforcement initiatives, while a Miami area man has filed a petition for reconsideration against the agency's $1 million forfeiture order for his pirate broadcast. Citing a recent Supreme Court ruling that limits the power of the federal agencies to impose civil fines without judicial review, Fabrice Polynice argues the FCC's long-standing forfeiture procedure is unconstitutional. At the heart of his challenge is the SEC versus Jarchese decision, which held that administrative agencies cannot levy punitive fines in suits at common law without the option of a jury trial. Policy claims that the FCC's administration process, which allows only a written reply and no hearing, fails to meet these constitutional standards. A white paper submitted with the petition by former FCC Deputy General Counsel Peter Karangia supports that interpretation, warning that most FCC forfeiture actions may no longer hold up in court without reform. The Commission has not yet responded to Police's petition, but is unlikely to grant reconsideration.
The nomination period for the 2025 AMSAT Board of Directors election ended on June 15, 2025. The following candidates have been duly nominated, and their candidate statements can be found at the link that follows. Barry Baines, Whiskey Delta 4, Alpha Sierra Whiskey. Jerry Buxton, November 0, Juliet Yankee. Drew Glassbrenner, Kilo Oscar 4, Mike Alpha. Frank Karnauskas, November 1, Uniform Whiskey. Douglas Tabor, November 6, Uniform Alpha. As 4 seats on the Board of Directors are up for election this year, the 4 candidates receiving the largest number of votes shall be declared elected to the seats. The candidate receiving the next largest number of votes shall be declared the first alternate. The voting period opened on July 15, 2025, and shall conclude on September 15, 2025. AMSAT members may review the candidate statements and cast their ballots at launch.amsat.org/2025-BOD-election. Results will be announced no later than September 30th, 2025.
Amateur radio had a crucial role in locating a mother and her 9-year-old son lost in California's Stanislaus National Forest, according to information from a sheriff's news release. On Friday, July 11th, 2025, the pair was reported overdue from a day trip to Camp Wolfboro, a popular scout camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains. For the rest of the story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ.
On Saturday, July 12th, the Calaveras County Volunteer Search and Rescue Team, SAR, was conducting its monthly training exercise along the Stanislaus River when members received notification that Tammy and son Sterling had been reported missing since Friday afternoon and were not answering their cell phones. The SAR team set up a command post at Black Springs Off-Highway Vehicle Riding and Recreational Area and quickly began initiating a road-based search using four-wheel drive vehicles and air support from the California Highway Patrol. Joining the search was a deputy and a Forest Service law enforcement ranger who responded to 911 text from campers in the area that a vehicle, possibly matching the descriptions of the pair's missing car, had been found. The SAR team began to find handwritten notes posted near a remote Forest Service road and then another about a mile away that included a telephone number and the names of the missing individuals. Then just before 6 p.m., the car and the lost mother and son were found. But the rescue was not over. SAR team members were unable to communicate with their command post using conventional frequencies and cell phones from their deep woods location. So, according to information from a Sheriff's Department news release, they used an amateur radio frequency to report their emergency traffic. That call was immediately answered by a retired El Dorado County communications supervisor, who is also an amateur radio operator, monitoring from his home. He contacted the El Dorado 911 Center and provided the information to the Calaveras County Dispatch. The SAR command post was notified, and the mother and her son were transported to waiting family members. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Young Sterling also had a hand in the rescue. He used his scout whistle to blow SOS, the internationally recognized Morse code distress signal, to give searchers a better chance of locating their position.
Dr. Carol Malazzo, MD, KP4MD of Citrus Heights, California, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Pacific Division effective July 9, 2025. She replaces John Litz, NZ6Q, who was seated to the position of Director in May. She will serve the remainder of a 3-year term ending December 31, 2025. Since 2015, Dr. Malazzo has served as Section Manager of the ARRL Sacramento Valley Section. She is volunteer examiner and an ARRL Life member. The ARRL Pacific Division comprises the ARRL sections of East Bay, Sacramento Valley, San Francisco, San Joaquin Valley, Santa Clara Valley, Nevada, and Pacific. Meanwhile, these changes have taken place in the ARRL Atlantic Division. Martin Marty Newingham, AG3I of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Atlantic Division effective July 15, 2025. Newingham will serve the remainder of a term that expires December 31, 2026. He replaces Martin J. Pittenger, KB3MXM, who resigned from the position in April. The ARRL Atlantic Division comprises the ARRL sections of Delaware, Eastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, D.C., Northern New York, Southern New Jersey, Western New York, and Western Pennsylvania. And finally, these changes were announced in the ARRL Sacramento Valley section. Jay Ballinger, N6SAC of Antelope, California, has been appointed Section Manager of the ARRL Sacramento Valley section effective July 16, 2025. He will serve the remainder of a term that expires on September 30, 2027. He replaces Dr. Carol Malazzo, MD, KP4MD, who was appointed as Pacific Division Vice Director. The ARRL Field Organization is the grassroots core that makes up 60,000 volunteers among ARRL membership. It is divided into 71 sections, each of which is led by a volunteer section manager who is nominated and voted on by the members of the section. Section managers serve 2-year terms. ARRL, the National Association of Amateur Radio, is governed by an all-volunteer board of directors. The elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year for terms of 3 years.
The amateur radio map of Canada has undergone a change with the creation of a new section. Radio amateurs who live in Canada's Yukon Territory now have a section to call their own. Radio Amateurs of Canada has separated the Yukon Territory from the overall territory section and given it a designation of its own. It now carries the abbreviation Yankee Uniform Kilo, setting it apart from hams in Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. Those regions continue to be part of a section known as Territories, which carries the abbreviation Tango Echo Romeo. Radio Amateurs of Canada made the announcement in the July-August issue of the journal called The Canadian Amateur. The change took effect on the 1st of July, While the new section may have consequences for ARRL Field Day, Sweepstakes, CW, Sweepstakes Single Sideband, and the 160-meter contest, the changes are not expected to have an impact on any major contests from the ARRL or the RAC. Organizers of QSO parties may need to review their operating rules.
Are you ready for another excursion into amateur radio history? This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another installment of the Ancient Amateur Archives.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
If you took part in the International Amateur Radio Union HF Championship on the second weekend of July, and you happened to work one of 5 stations operating from the grounds of the Euston Estate in Suffolk, England, you were also part of the field test for the World Radio Sport Team Championship taking place next year. The 5 stations were on the air from actual site locations for an important training exercise, testing of the masts, antennas, and radios, and a little experimentation to prepare for next year's competition. Volunteers got a chance to practice setup of the equipment and give a thorough test of the scoreboard and IT networking system. Despite some minor issues, the exercise was declared a success, right down to the report from operators that there were no issues with interference between stations, which were running 100 watts. The organizers wrote on the WRTC website, "Activity will be different next year. Hopefully 10 meters will be more cooperative, and the interest in chasing 50 real WRTC stations will be higher."
In our last installment, we traced the development of FM and repeaters from 1932 up to 1970. Since the FCC rules at that time had no provision for repeater operation, stations in repeater service were operated under the Part 97 provisions covering remote control. The FCC, in February 1970, came out with docket number 18803, which set forth the Commission's proposed repeater rules. These included small subbands set aside for repeater operation, a ban on linked, crossband, and multiband repeaters, a requirement for whistle-on or other tone control, and a requirement that the licensee of a repeater station be in attendance at the transmitter or at an authorized fixed control point to monitor all transmissions of the station. In regards to the 2-meter band, the FCC set up the repeater subband in such a way that 2/3 of it would not be accessible to technicians. Reaction was quick and negative. The ARRL and others felt that the proposed rules were so restrictive that they might be the end of amateur repeater operation as it existed at that time. Counter-proposals, far less restrictive than the FCC's, were submitted to the Commission. While amateurs waited for the revised FCC rules, another problem had to be solved. When 2-meter FM operations started in the 1960s, 146.94 had been chosen as the national simplex frequency. This was the highest wideband FM frequency available to technicians. After repeaters came along, amateurs discovered that the surplus commercial equipment in use had a maximum bandwidth of 600 kilohertz. Thus, 146.34 was chosen for the first repeater input. However, in areas where 9.4 was in heavy use by simplex stations, 146.76 was chosen as the output. This led to the problem of non-standard splits, and in some areas of the country, repeaters such as 3476, 2894, and 3482 could be found. The frequency 146.94 was a battleground between the simplex versus repeater groups. Amateurs were also fighting a minor battle over 146.64 megahertz, which in some parts of the country was a DX simplex frequency. To make matters worse, all transceivers back then were crystal controlled. With crystals at $10 per pair, it would cost $120, or about $350 in today's money, to fill all 12 channels in a 2-meter radio. It was possible to equip your radio with the repeaters and simplex frequency used in one area, then find all of your channels were useless 200 miles away. A national plan was needed. The Texas VHF-FM Society proposed such a plan, which was described in the May 1972 issue of QST. In it, the repeater offset was standardized at 600 kilohertz, 146.94 and 146.64 became repeater outputs, 146.4 through 146.58 became simplex, and 146.52 was chosen as the national simplex frequency. In the 146 through 147 range, accessible to technicians and above, there were 13 repeater and 7 simplex channels. The 147 through 148 range, available only to generals and above, had 14 repeater and 6 simplex channels. Note that in the Texas plan, all repeater inputs were 600 kilohertz below the output, even in the 147 through 148 range. Except for changing the inputs to the high side above 147 megahertz, the Texas plan was adopted. The gradual acceptance of a 2-meter band plan still did not resolve the FCC issue. The Texas plan, as good as it was, violated the FCC's 1970 proposal. The Commission still had not issued any repeater rules, nor had they acted on the ARRL's 1969 request to give technicians the full 2-meter band. Finally, in September 1972, the FCC issued new rules covering repeaters, logging, and portable mobile operations. Liberal repeater subbands were authorized at 52 through 54, 146 through 148, 222 through 225, and 442 through 450 megahertz. Logging requirements, especially for repeater and mobile stations, was simplified. Repeater operators no longer needed a tape recorder hooked up to their stations. The requirement for a portable or mobile station to notify the FCC of operation in a particular radio district was also reduced. No longer would amateurs contemplating a cross-country trip with their radios have to write to each district on their journey in order to inform the engineer of the trip. Repeaters would have to be licensed. Call signs beginning with the prefix WR would be issued. The repeater license application was complex. Each applicant for a repeater license had to submit certain data to the FCC regarding the technical, operational, and effective radiated power of the proposed station. Whistle on or tone control was no longer required. 2 repeaters could be linked, but multi-linked or cross-band repeaters were prohibited. Repeater monitoring and control requirements were made more flexible. And finally, the FCC acted in part on the ARRL's 1969 proposal. Although they did not give technicians full 2-meter privileges, they did grant them the 147 through 148 segment. Technicians could now operate on all 2-meter repeaters without violating FCC rules. The new FCC repeater rules, coupled with the Texas plan, caused a surge in 2-meter FM activity. It also was the shot in the arm the hobby needed to fully recover from the decrease in growth caused by incentive licensing. Manufacturers such as Drake, Standard, Regency, Tempo, Genève, Clegg, and Midland poured rigs onto the amateur market. Heathkit had the very successful HW202, followed by the even more popular HW2036. The increase in the number of technicians on 2-meter FM finally killed the technicians are experimenters, not communicators theory. And finally, thanks to 2-meter FM, amateur radio grew by over 33% in the 1970s. In 1975, due to increased demand, the FCC authorized the use of 144.5 through 145.5 megahertz for repeater operation. Technicians were given access to this subband. In 1978, the FCC relaxed the rules, eliminated the separate repeater license and the WR prefix, and gave technicians the full 2-meter band. From 1978 through 1981, the synthesized revolution took place as affordable PLL and microprocessor rigs drove the last of the crystal-controlled radios off the market. Today, a name brand 2-meter HT costs about $175. With it, you can access over 4,000 repeaters or scan the VHF high band. Compare that to 1972, when a crystal-controlled radio equipped with 12 channels cost about $300, or about $800 in today's dollars. We truly have come a long way. In our next installment, we will look at a couple of license proposals in the mid-1970s and the controversy they caused. I hope you will join me. This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes. You won't have to remember calls, dates, URLs, or other details. You can just check the show notes. As of this Saturday, there will be 151 days until Christmas. Time is flying, so we had better get started. The DX word of the week is DX Spot. What is a DX spot? In my early days of DXing, say in the late 1970s, DXers would participate in a phone chain. When a DXer heard a new country or a rare country, he would call one or two people with details such as call sign, frequency, mode, and any other pertinent information that would be needed to work the DX station. Each of those hams would then call two others to let them know that a specific entity had been heard or spotted, and that process would continue until all of the hams who agreed to participate would be called. I was part of this chain years ago, and my family would not be thrilled for me to get a call at 2 a.m., but it happened. Into the early 80s we go, and the process moved from landline phones to 2-meter simplex frequencies and or repeaters. Eventually, special software for computers was utilized that would allow the lucky ham to enter all of the appropriate information into a screen, and then it would be passed along to any other hams who happen to be connected. In this way, thousands of hams in a large geographic area would be notified of the DX. Each of these DXers who were heard or spotted would be called spots. Today, it is much more complex. For instance, my logging software collects spots from all over the country and compares it against my logbook to determine if I need it or not. If so, an announcement is made at my home station and a text message is sent to my phone. The software also checks the origination of the spot. It would not really benefit me to know that a DX station in Mali was heard in England, so it actually chokes it down to just the Midwest. I hope that explains the concepts of a spot and a spotting network, which is the collection of spotting information. We have a press release from George, AA7JV, quote, "The Araricura DX Group is pleased to announce it has received permission from the Brazilian Navy for a de-expedition to St. Peter and St. Paul Archipelago. The operation will take place in the October-November 2025 timeframe. The actual dates will be announced later. The St. Peter and St. Paul rocks are located at 0 degrees 55.2 degrees north and 29 degrees 20.9 minutes west, or about 60 miles north of the equator, approximately 600 miles from the city of Natal on the Brazilian mainland. St. Peter and St. Paul rocks, PY0S, is number 14 on Club Log's Most Wanted list and number 3 in Asia. PY0S was last activated in 2012. Since then, permission to land and operate from the rocks has not been granted. Our radio in a box or RIB capability enables us to make this activation possible without the operators being physically on the rocks, thereby meeting the key requirement of the Navy for a very small footprint operation with minimum human presence." End quote. That is indeed exciting. I remember a conversation I had with Don, N1DG, several years ago about rig in a box. Don felt that this would allow us to operate from locations we might never be able to operate from again. It would seem that this has now come to pass, so I'm really glad, and that's exciting. As you know, each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. November 3, Radio Papa, Rafael, using his Yankee November 2 Radio Papa call sign, is QRV from Nicaragua. Rafael says that he will, quote, be calling CQDX, end quote, vacation style again this summer until August 4th, and that he hopes to work as many of you as possible. TY5FR is QRV from Benin until August 6th, with DL1 BUG red operating. He is using CW and sideband on 80 through 10 meters, and you can QSL that DXpedition to DL1 BUG or go through Club Log, OQRS, and LOTW. Adrian, G0KOM, is QRV as ZC4MK from the UK sovereign base areas on Cyprus during July. QSL via OQRS, LOTW, or his home call. 3 Baker 9 Fox Robert, is active again from the Rodriguez Islands after taking a break from radio. He now wants to handle his own QSLing, no longer wanting to use LOTW, QRZ.com, or Clublog. If you want a card, contact him directly. Do not go through M0OXO. He does say that all those sent through M0OXO OQRS are now up to date, quote, pending the next bureau shipment. And I can tell you from experience, Robert is a tremendous operator. I mean, he has huge pileups and he manages them well. So if you happen to hear 3 Baker 9 Fox Radio, it's worth giving a listen because it's like a training session. He is really, really good. The Tyumen Regional Radio Association in Asiatic Russia will celebrate its 95th anniversary in 2025, marking nearly a century as a key communications channel for the region's residents. In honor of this milestone, a special diploma called 95 Years of Tyumen Regional Radio will be awarded to amateur radio operators who earn 95 points through QSOs between July 15th and August 14th of 2025, including a required contact with R95 TLR. The special call sign R95 TLR will be active throughout this period to commemorate the anniversary and support participation. So you may want to watch for that special event station. A group of Italian operators are planning a DXpedition to Mayat Island, FH, as Tango Oscar 3 Kilo from August 2nd through August 10th. Equipment will include 3 ICOM 7300s and 3 FM HLV 300 Plus HD 500 watt amplifiers. They will use dipoles on 80, 60, 40, and 30 meters, a 3-element beam on 10 and 6 meters, a 3-element beam on 20 and 15 meters, and a multiband beam on 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. Tango Oscar 3 Kilo will be active on 80 through 6 meters on sideband, CW, FT8, FT4. And I can't wait for that one either. That's going to be a good one. And I've got lots of band slots to fill, so got to get busy. OM2DX, Mikkel, says all is going according to plan to be QRV from Fiji as 3 Delta 2 X-Ray Delta from July 22nd to the 25th, and Alpha 32DX from Tonga, July 25th through the 30th. So by the time you're listening to this, he should be in Tonga and QRV. He says that he did make a few hundred QSOs last week as VK2/OM2DX, so the equipment's working fine. SP9 HGN will be QRV from JW Svalbard from July 24th to August 2nd, QRP, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters, mainly sideband and possibly FT8. He will be signing JW/SP9 HGN/P and will climb 3 summits to operate at most an hour from each one. And you can QSL via LOTW. Andy, 5 Zulu 4 Victor Juliet, goes over to Zanzibar Island, Tanzania, using the call sign 5 Hotel 1 Victor Juliet, July 24th to the 28th, and the IOTA contest weekend. He will be low powered to wires, QSL via M0URX, and his QTH is beachside. Malaysia's Independence Day, or their National Day, is August 31. This year marks the 68th anniversary, and a special event station, 9 Mike, 1957 Mike, will begin operations on August 1st and will last until September 30th, with a special emphasis on August 30 and 31. The station will be located in Bandar Baru Kuala Neris, Tenyagaga in West Malaysia, which is 9 Mike 2. Activity will be on sideband, CW, FT8, and other digital modes on 80 through 10 meters. Tony, IK7WL, is traveling starting August 2nd. From August 2nd to the 10th, he will be QRV is 9 Uniform 0 Delta X-ray from Burundi. Next, he will be QRV from Rwanda is 9 X-ray 0 Delta X-ray from August 10th to the 18th. He will then move to Benin and Toga as TY2AA and 5 Victor 0 DX from August 18th to September 7th. He then wraps up his trip from Nigeria as 5 November 4 ATM. Tony travels to Africa each year on humanitarian missions using his amateur radio operations to raise funds for those in need. He aims to provide food, medicines, and educational support directly to vulnerable children, emphasizing that every contribution helps bring hope and relief. Supporters can donate to his mission through PayPal at paypal.me/Tony, and that's TONYDR73 or TonyDoctor73. E51KEE will be Steve, ZL2KE, from Rarotonga, South Cook Islands, August 3rd to the 18th. And he will be using CW and some sideband on 40 through 10. And you can QSL that direct through IK2DUW. He will also be using Club Log and LOTW. The Korean Amateur Radio League's Chongbuk headquarters, regular call sign 6 Kilo 0 Mike Fox, will be using the Hotel Lima 80 Victor call sign August 1st to the 31st. This marks the celebration of the 80th anniversary since the liberation of Korea on August 15th, 1945. Last weekend, the DX Mentor Podcast YouTube channel featured a group discussion on all things QSLing. The comments we've received so far are excellent, and we addressed several issues. This weekend, look for a new release on the DXCC program. This is another group discussion that is lively and informative. If you're interested in DX podcasting YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all DX activities. And finally, with a contest update, I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work an all-time new one. This weekend is the Radio Society of Great Britain, RSGB, Islands on the Air contest, July 26th through the 27th. Created in 1993, this event now attracts thousands of participants, both island activators and chasers. Full details, including the official rules, are on the RSGB website. Known activations appear in this and past issues of the Weekly DX and on the NG3K website. Again, good luck to all participants. Let me know if you participate and how you do. Please send me an email if you need any details on this topic or anything else that was mentioned. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air, This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. In the community of radio amateurs scattered around the planet, we have a habit of getting together with others to have fun in whatever shape that takes. The obvious ones are hamfests, car boot sales, raffles, and other amateur-adjacent pursuits. But we also do things like license training, weekly on-air nets, contesting, portable activations, climbing mountains or hills, setting up in parks or lighthouses. We set up on a field day, just for fun, and find reasons for any number of other activities. Some of these are solitary affairs, but many are best enjoyed shared with multiple friends, both old and new ones. Having been a member of this community since 2010, I've come to observe an aspect of this community that is odd, to say the least. We organise all these events, but rarely promote it beyond a single email to 3 people, if that. It's almost as if the average organiser thinks that their event permeates the community by magic osmosis. Even if there is any form of promotion, there's sometimes a date and time, but hardly ever does it show that time in UTC. even if it's a radio event. It's like we've forgotten that radio waves pass through time zones, or there is a misconception that everyone on the planet knows what your local time zone is, let alone if it's summer or winter time at the time of the event. So, what does promoting your event look like if you actually want people to know about it? For starters, you should consider who you want to have as a participant. A local hamfest is unlikely to attract people from around the globe, but Friedrichshafen and Dayton are examples that contradict that notion. A VHF-only event might be intended for local amateurs, but what if it allows for satellite or digital contacts, like say via Allstar, IRLP or Echolink? Similarly, you might run a weekly on-air net but have visitors from around the planet. The point being that your audience might not be exactly what you initially think. In other words, there might be people playing from further afield. Consider that when you announce what time the event starts and finishes. Speaking of finishing, adding an expected closing time is helpful for participants where only one member of the family lives and breathes amateur radio, and the rest just want to get on with their respective lives, so consideration is welcome. Aside from telling your audience when and for how long the event goes, adding a location is not optional. You'd be surprised how many events say things like, "It's again in the usual location," or "We're at the community hall," without ever publishing an address. I can tell you it's fun discovering that the name of the hall isn't unique. Now for the big one. After putting the information together about the event itself, where and how do you announce it? For starters, on your own website, in whatever form that takes. It serves two purposes: announcing to the world what is happening, but it's also the definitive place where the right information is published. This is important because things change, get cancelled, moved, updated, whatever. Life isn't static, so you need to define a place where the official announcement lives. At this point, I'd like to mention that this is often where promotion stops. It's easy to think that in your universe everyone you know is aware of your website, but that's just not true. A single place to publish is not the end of the process, it's the start. Then you need to use things like the local news broadcast, the national news broadcast, the international news broadcasts, contesting websites and calendars, social media, Fediverse, and whatever else you can get your hands on. You need to include it in your own club news, in club newsletters from other clubs, on the local amateur notice board. You need to talk about the event on air, share it during on-air nets, and if it's recurring, tell the world that it's going to happen again next year. Nothing here is revolutionary. It's not like launching a rocket into space. This is basic common sense. And you, too, can do this. If you need help, ask. So, if you have an event that you want to have participants for, you need to make noise. Publishing the announcement at the local planning department in Alpha Centauri 50 years before the event is going to cause issues. As will defining the date for an annual event as, when the June solstice is on a weekday, Monday through Friday, the weekend following shall be the weekend of the event. When the June solstice falls on a Saturday or Sunday, that weekend shall be the weekend of the event, but only for the winter field day. The summer one requires you to count back 4 weekends, or forward, depending on if you're talking about the spring or summer event, and add one if it falls on the weekend. In case you're wondering, no, I didn't make that up. It's real. I'll leave you to ponder how you'd add such an event to your family calendar. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
There is a new addition to Studio One at W1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. A complete station of the latest gear from Flex Radio, including a Flex 8600, Signature Series SDR transceiver, a Maestro C control console, Power Genius XL amplifier, and Radio Sport RS60 CF headset. For more details on the recent addition of the Flex system, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8 IDJ, files this report.
There is a new addition to Studio One at W1AW, a complete station of the latest gear from Flex Radio, including a Flex 8600 Signature Series SDR transceiver, a Maestro C control console, Power Genius XL, PGXL amplifier, and Radio Sport RS60CF headset. The equipment is the latest addition to W1AW, which hosts a complement of equipment in each of 3 operating studios under rotating agreements with major amateur radio manufacturers. During his visit to present the station to ARRL on Wednesday, July 16, 2025, Flex Radio Chief Technology Officer Stephen Hicks, N5AC, described the station as an addition for the benefit of ARRL members and all visitors to W1AW. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, and CEO David Minster, NA2AA, were on hand to receive the equipment on behalf of ARRL. The Flex 8600 provides all of the latest features that we have, said Hicks, and with all the Flex radios, they are continuously being upgraded, so we have software releases on an ongoing basis and add features and functionality to it. ARRL members can come in here and try this equipment out and get used to it. ARRL Director of Marketing and Innovation Bob Interbenson, NQ1R, expressed gratitude for the collaboration with Flex Radio, saying, "We're grateful to have W1AW equipped with a full Flex radio station, allowing members and visitors to operate and enjoy this current generation technology when they come to experience the latest in amateur radio innovation." Interbenson explained that ARRL's partnership with Flex Radio is an ongoing arrangement with manufacturing, highlighting a shared commitment with the industry to advance amateur radio by offering a hands-on experience to W1AW visitors. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Hicks and his Flex Radio colleague Tony Brock Fisher, K1KP, also provided a highly informative presentation to ARRL staff on the forthcoming Flex Radio Aurora series of 500-watt SDR transceivers. Their talk highlighted the radio's innovative use of polar modulation to address intermodulation distortion, a common challenge in linear amplification methods, while also reducing power consumption and heat generation. The technology has made it possible to reduce the weight and footprint of a high-power HF station into a lightweight radio that can easily travel as an airline carry-on.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. We have learned that AST and Science LLC has filed an application with the FCC to use the 430 through 440 megahertz band for their satellites, all 248 of them. This will be for telemetry, tracking, and telecommand. If approved, they will be using amateur bands for commercial purposes. This is of great concern to AMSAT, as our satellites also use this portion of the band as authorized by the FCC. Public comment was accepted through July 21st. AMSAT filed a comment, as did AMSAT Germany and over 600 individuals. It was interesting that their application was to use the 70-centimeter portion of the band during initial post-launch period and outside the U.S. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for the weekly solar weather and propagation forecast. Solar activity has been at low levels this week, with only C-class flare activity. Region 4149 underwent evolution as it grew in overall length and developed spots in its intermediate area. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. A filament eruption was observed on July 23 centered near N07W12. The associated coronal mass ejection was then observed first in stereo alpha coronagraph imagery around July 23, with what is perhaps a secondary portion of the filament eruption then becoming visible in LOSCO C2 coronagraph imagery, which appears as a very faint partial halo. Modeling of this event determined an arrival at Earth near midday on July 27. Solar activity is expected to be low with a chance for M-class flares, which are minor or moderate, through July 26. The solar wind environment has reflected negative polarity coronal hole high-speed streams, but enhanced solar wind conditions, due to negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences, are expected to continue through July 25. A return to a more ambient-like environment is anticipated for July 26 and beyond. The 10.7 cm flux for the near term will be 138 on July 25, 135 on July 26 and 27, and 130 on July 28 through the 30th. Predicted sunspot numbers will be July 25, 135, July 26 and 27, 148, July 28 through the 30th, 136. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week on July 26th and 27th, it's the RSGB IOTA contest, CW and phone. Also on the 26th and 27th, the Alabama QSO party, CW and phone. July 27th, the ARS Flight of the Bumblebees, CW. July 28th, the RSGP FT4 contest, that's digital. July 29th, the ICWC medium speed test, that is CW. August 1st, the NCCC Sprint, CW. August 2nd and 3rd, the 1010 International Summer Contest, single sideband and phone. And on August 2nd and 3rd, the North American QSO Party CW. And on August 2nd and 3rd, the ARRL 220 MHz Up Distance Contest, CW, phone, and digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on July 26th, ARRL West Virginia State Convention in Hamfest, that's in Sutton, West Virginia. August 2nd, the ARRL Maine State Convention in Hamfest, that's in Augusta, Maine. August 3rd, the SVARC Berryville Hamfest hosting the ARRL Roanoke Division Convention, that's in Berryville, Virginia. And on August 9th, the ARRL Idaho State Convention, that's in Post Falls, Idaho. Remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
With deep respect and gratitude, the amateur radio community commemorates the life of Joseph L. Arcure, Jr., known worldwide by his call sign W3HNK. Born on Christmas Day, 1933, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Joe's life was as vibrant and far-reaching as his radio waves he cherished. He leaves behind a legacy defined by devotion, generosity, and an unwavering spirit of service. Joe's fascination with radio began during a period of convalescence after a medical discharge from the National Guard. Encouraged by his father, Joe embarked on a path of radio repair, unwittingly setting the stage for a lifelong passion. Building a super heterodyne receiver, he was first introduced to the magic of amateur radio when he tuned in W3 Queen Victor Queen, sparking a journey that would connect him to countless voices and hearts around the globe. Licensed in 1956 as WN3HNK, Joe's first station operated on a modest 40-meter dipole. Driven by curiosity and tenacity, he soon upgraded his license in New York City, a process that became legendary in family lore thanks to a broken pencil and Esther, his steadfast wife and greatest supporter. An avid DXer, Joe was struck by the DX bug in 1957, pursuing contacts with distant stations on CW, AM, and later single sideband. His passion for connecting with the world reached a new milestone in August 1963, when a QSL confirmation request from Southern Rhodesia introduced him to the role of QSL manager. From that moment onward, Joe became the QSL manager for hundreds of DX stations, never turning anyone away and often funding QSL cards himself. His meticulous management, warm correspondence, and tireless commitment made him the most recognized QSL manager in the world. Joe's mailroom became a miniature United Nations filled with letters, stamps, and QSL cards from every corner of the earth. He delighted in both administrative and the human sides of the hobby, fostering connections that transcended borders and languages. Introduced into the CQDX Hall of Fame in 1979, Joe's reputation for integrity and friendship was as enduring as his presence on the airwaves. Beyond managing QSLs, Joe explored the world as an operator, participating in de-expeditions to Saint Martin, the British Virgin Islands, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. His love for CW, especially on 15 meters, reflected nostalgia for his early days as a novice and his reverence for the golden age of radio. Joe confirmed 337 current DXCC countries, and while a few rare ones eluded him, his pursuit of excellence and community spirit never waned. He was also known for helping fellow collectors and for sharing his collection of stamps and stories with friends, old and new. Joe's generosity extended far beyond QSL cards. He embodied the very best of amateur radio: selflessness, mentorship, and camaraderie. He made no profit from his service, reinvested every donation into furthering the exchange of QSLs and the joy of the hobby. To all who knew him, whether through a cherished QSL card, a voice on the air, or a story told at a club meeting, Joe Arcure was more than just the ultimate QSL manager. He was a beacon of kindness, a trusted friend, and a devoted steward of amateur radio's highest ideals. His legacy endures in every confirmation, every new contact, and every operator inspired by his example. The pile-ups will never be the same without him. 73, Joe, your signal remains strong in our hearts.
The amateur radio on the International Space Station program is seeking formal and informal education institutions and organizations, individually or working together, to host an amateur radio contact with a crew member on board the space station. ARIS anticipates the contact will be held between January 1 of 2026 and June 30 of 2026. Crew scheduling and ISS orbits will determine the exact contact date. To maximize these large contact opportunities, ARIS is looking for organizations that will draw large numbers of participants and integrate the contact into a well-developed educational plan. Crew members aboard the International Space Station will participate in scheduled amateur radio contacts. These radio contacts will be approximately 10 minutes in length and allow students to interact with the astronauts through a question and answer session. The deadline to submit a proposal is August 29 of 2025. Proposal information and more details, such as expectations, proposal guidelines, and the proposal form can be found at www.ariss.org. An ARIS introductory webinar session will be held on Zoom on July 30 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Questions should be directed to education@ariss-usa.org.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
The Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HAMSCI, is preparing for a series of upcoming meteor scatter experiments. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details on this special operating event.
Operation will take place during two well-known meteor showers, Perseids on August 11th and 12th, and Geminids on August 12th and 13th. This is a combination special event and contest to generate contact during meteor scatter events using the 6 and 10 meter bands. 10 meters has been used infrequently for meteor scatter study due to past symbol rate limits. However, with recent changes in the FCC rules, WSJT-X/MSK144 protocols may now be used on HF bands. Operators are needed now to be active on the MSK-144 or passive if possible, reporting via PSK Reporter as monitors. The best times are early morning hours prior to 10 meters opening to F2 propagation. Meteor scatter propagation occurs well below F2 and is supported in or near the E layer, where the meteor ionization tracks occur. Saturday mornings are being used regularly to announce and coordinate 10-meter contacts using Ping Jockey Central. Announcements are also made on the Front Range 6-meter group's I.O. due to the substantial number of meteor scour operators in that group. To be successful, both active and passive operators are needed. The upcoming August meteor shower is an excellent time to set up your equipment and join with other operators preparing for the event. At a later date, the HAMSAI team will be collecting operator contact information. Contest rules can be found at www.hamsci.org/MSQP, and a description of the HAMSAI Meteor Shower QSO Party 2025 can be found at that same location. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Data will be collected from both bands during the scheduled times in August and December and will be analyzed offline using both PSK Reporter raw data and operator contact logs from WSJTX. User data, including both logged contact and received reports, are necessary for valid experimental analysis. The latter can be provided by any received system reporting on MSK 144 through PSK Reporter. HAMSAI serves as a means for fostering collaboration between professional researchers and amateur radio operators. For more information about HAMSAI and to join the mailing list, visit www.hamsci.org.
The ARRL Board of Directors met on July 18th and 19th, 2025, and accomplished work on behalf of members. Some of the highlights of the meeting include establishment of a 10-band DXCC award, review of the status of ARRL's Washington advocacy on behalf of amateur radio, creation of a new ARRL museum and research library called Radio Alpha, found at www.arrl.org/Radio Alpha. Action on the report and recommendations of the Special Committee on Bylaw 46 that was published in December 2024 and first considered by the Board in January. Establishment of 2026 as the Year of the Club to honor and support the work of ARRL-affiliated radio clubs. And approval for a year-long celebration in 2026 to mark the semi-quincentennial of the United States, including a commemorative ARRL US 250 Worked All States Award for contacts made during the year. Read more about the actions taken by the ARRL Board of Directors in the member bulletin that was emailed earlier this week.
A team of 6 students from the University of Surrey, the University of Portsmouth, and the University of Southampton are integrating equipment that they designed, manufactured, and tested to a 12-meter-high Stellar Kinetics Kia 1 rocket in southern Oman. The launch from Etwak Spaceport to an anticipated altitude of 500 kilometers will be the first flight of a 2-stage Kia 1 rocket and one of 5 planned test flights from later this year. The spaceport is located at 18 degrees latitude overlooking the Indian Ocean, making it an ideal location for launching vehicles with multiple orbits, including equatorial orbit, sun-synchronous orbit, polar orbit, and medium Earth orbit, as well as geostationary orbits. The spaceport should be fully operational by the year 2027. The university's payload, known as the Jovian 0, will test student-designed 6U CubeSat deployment pods and their payloads. The battery-powered satellite will not completely deploy from its pod, but will remain tethered to it. However, it will capture video and still images of the deployment process, verifying correct operation of the pod. It will also flight test hardware from the imaging payload called DAVE, D-A-V-E, which stands for Dual Aperture for Viewing Earth, which will fly on the future Jovian 1 orbital mission, along with an AMSAT-UK educational outreach and a U/V FM transponder. The images transmitted from the Jovian 0 during this suborbital test flight will use a 500 kilobit per second QPSK. AMSAT-UK has provided a high-gain 4-watt, 435 MHz amplifier for the mission and a deployable 435 MHz antenna. Data will be received at ETLOC by the students' portable ground station.
Some 32% of global semiconductor production could face climate change-related copper supply disruptions by 2035, quadrupling from today's levels, advisory firm PricewaterhouseCoopers has said in a report for business leaders. Chile, the world's largest copper producer, already grapples with water shortages that are slowing down production. By 2035, most of the 17 countries supplying the chip industry with copper will be at risk of drought. The last fuel chip shortage, fueled by a pandemic-driven demand spike that coincided with factory shutdowns, crippled the automotive industry and halted production lines across the other chip-dependent sectors. Copper mines from China, Australia, Peru, Brazil, the U.S., Democratic Republic of Congo, Mexico, Zambia, and Mongolia will also be affected, sparing none of the world's chip-making regions from risk, PricewaterhouseCoopers has said.
Beginning in early August, amateur radio frequencies will be active with feline and canine QSOs. International Cat Day special event station Whiskey 1 Charlie in the United States will be on the air August 7th and 8th from 0000 to 2359 UTC. All HF frequencies will be in use, CW and SSB only. Call signs in Europe will be Delta Alpha 0, Charlie Alpha Tango, Germany, Yankee Lima 1, Charlie Alpha Tango, Latvia, and Golf Bravo 9, Charlie Alpha Tango in the United Kingdom. International Cat Day was created in 2002 by the International Fund for Animal Welfare. It is a day to raise awareness for cats and learn about ways to help and protect them. A QSL certificate can be downloaded from www.qrz.com. Meanwhile, International Dog Day, or National Dog Day in the United States, is held on August 26th every year. Special event station Kilo 2 Delta will be on the air, joined by operators in Europe. The U.S.-based team of 10 operators will be operating from August 20th through the 26th, from 0000 to 0000 UTC. The tradition was created 21 years ago in 2004, that's 147 in dog years, by pet advocate Colleen Page, a pet and family lifestyle expert. August was chosen because it is the month her family adopted their first dog, Sheltie, from an animal shelter. International Dog Day stations will be using Hamlog Online. 4 awards will be available to amateur radio operators making contacts with International Dog Day stations.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
And finally this week, if you use the lakes, canals, or any other waterways in Great Britain almost as much as you use your radio, now is the time to combine the two activities. Registration has begun for British Inland Waterways on the Air, which takes place during the August Bank Holiday weekend. The organizers are encouraging early registration, hoping that radio operators will identify the days they are operating on and on what modes. The event takes place on Saturday, the 23rd August, to Bank Holiday Monday, the 25th. You can operate on or near the various waterways throughout the United Kingdom. The primary bands will be 2 meters and 40 meters. If you want to register or see who is already on board for the weekend, visit the website nharg.org.uk/BIWOTA.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on the internet, on low-power FM stations, and on great repeater systems like the WB3GXW repeater on 147.225 MHz in Silver Springs, Maryland, serving all of Silver Springs and also covering the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. WB3GXW can also be found on Echolink Conference Server node 6154. If you are a This Week in Amateur Radio affiliate and you would like us to give a free on-air announcement of your station's carriage of the program, please send us an email with the station location, call sign, coverage area, and day and time you air This Week in Amateur Radio, plus any other information you would like us to impart. You can send to the following email, w2xbs77@gmail.com. That address once again is w2xbs77@gmail.com. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.